G'day YouTube, this is Warbles on a Lot with something of a drunken rant, I guess, because I don't pretend to be sober. Here I am, living at South Dundee Heights, and in the local bottle shop I found some American beer that calls itself Dundee India Pale Ale, right? SS Dundee is what it says on the book. And it's, what do we got here? Imported by International Liquor Wholesalers, Dundee Brewing Company, Rochester, New York, USA. Right? Same outfit, I think, that made the Wingwalkers Pale Ale. But this says Dundee India Pale Ale. Hear, hear, a toast to everyone who helped bring us the beers we all love today, starting with the sailors of the East India Company way back in the 1790s. Why? Without them, brewers might never have developed the more strongly hopped pale ales we all enjoy so much nowadays. Ours is a balanced and bright, with soft, freshly baked aroma and subtle hints of spice. So, enjoy one today, and while you're at it, try learning the anchor bend knot. It was another favourite of the East Indiamen, and a fitting tribute indeed. Best before date on the bottleneck, and guess what? We have 5100000101 www.dundeebeer.com. So we don't actually have a best before date on the bottle. Isn't that sad? Howsoever, what we have is a Warbles on a Lot who's actually already imbibed 5 of those things in about the last 3 hours. And at 1.8 standard drunks per stubby, that means that Warbles is not remotely sober. Okay? I'm not fallen over drunk, but I am not sober. And I would like to discuss the issue of how suffering is nothing but signal processing. Or as my daughter would put it, perception is reality. So, from her viewpoint, if you've got a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5-year-old child who perceives that their parent does not care about them as a child, as an individual, as a person, as an entity in the universe, because there's something else vastly more important, something like work, pleasing the boss, earning the money, paying the bills, feeding the mortgage, then it is the perception of the child which matters. It doesn't matter a rat's ass what the parent thinks they're doing. Oh, I haven't got time to talk to the child. I'm flat out making the money come in. What matters is what happens in the mind of the child. Perception is reality. If the child grows up perceiving that work matters more than them, does the child not grow up with a deeply ingrained inferiority complex? The child grows up believing that they are not as important as whatever work their parent is doing. Yeah? Now surely, historically, for the last 50 or 100,000 years, the parent would take the child with them. Digging roots, gathering berries, whatever. And by the time the child is able to keep up, walking along behind the men who are hunting, the child would go hunting or gathering. The natural history of human child rearing is to take the infants along with the adults. It's only since the invention of the economy whereupon the, quote, employers abrogate the right to monopolise all of the time and all of the attention of the people they are paying to do the stuff they can't be bothered to do for themselves. It's only since then that children have been declared by the economists, the people who reckon they know all about the economy. It's only since then that the children have been declared to be superfluous to requirements, a danger within the workplace. And so somebody else has been paid to mind the children. Before the Industrial Revolution, it was grandparents and siblings and aunts and uncles. Since the Industrial Revolution, the theory is that daddy who's a lawyer and mummy who's an accountant, and he gets $250 an hour for his time and she gets $150 an hour for her time. So genetically their child is going to require roughly $200 an hour worth of childcare. But because their economic contribution is so vital to their household, mummy and daddy go off to work and they put the kid in long-stay daycare when it should be being breastfed. And in long-stay daycare there's a high school dropout getting perhaps $20 an hour as a training wage, maybe only $12 an hour, and they're trying to look after 5 infants, 5 little babies in nappies. So daddy the lawyer and mummy the accountant, who are off aggrandising their own ego, earning an average of $200 an hour between them, $250 for him and $150 for her, they're abandoning their child to a fifth of $12.50 an hour. For the first 3 years of life, and then they send the kid to preschool, and then the kid shows up at kindergarten, and when it shows up at kindergarten it's got lower emotional integrity and intellectual development scores than the child of a single parent unemployed household, where the parent is happy to pay attention to the child, because human babies require 38 moments of eye contact per minute awake for the first 3 years. 28 is minimum. 25 is how many times a chimpanzee looks at the group leader to see if it's in trouble. Oh, am I in trouble? Oh, am I in trouble? Oh, am I in trouble? Yeah, well, 38 times a minute a human baby makes a noise which the parent or the regular, loving, trusted carer is supposed to respond to by looking back at the child. And if you're going to sentence your child to any less moments of eye contact than that, then your child is going to show up at kindergarten with an inferiority complex, which your child will then overcompensate for by becoming a bully. Congratulations. Aren't you a clever bunch of economic slaves? And then, for the anti-natalists and for the Efilists. Okay, let's get down to it. Suffering is nothing but signal processing. It is purely a matter of opinion. I propose to go to a sublime or perhaps ridiculous example in order to prove this. Let us go to a mind experiment, a thought experiment, so beloved of the anti-natalists and the Efilists. Imagine you're sitting behind a telescope and you're looking at a situation a mile away. Therein you can observe 15 young, bemuscled teenage males and one, maybe teenage, maybe in her 20s, female. As you watch, they disrobe, they commence slap and tickle games, the slap and tickle becomes a bit more intense and could be qualified as foreplay, and before you know what you're looking at, through your telescope you get to see 15 males changing partners and having multiple sex with one female. Suffering is nothing but signal processing. Perception is reality. How do you know, unless you go and talk to the female concerned, how do you know whether she is indulging in multiple simultaneous consensual orgasm with a football team because she happens to be the town bike and she wants to fuck 15 guys at once? Or how do you know if she's the local simpering virgin from the Bible study group being pack raped by the football team? From the distance of a mile away with a telescope, you or I or anybody else has no idea. Because her perception of various penises entering various of her orifices is totally up to her. It's a matter of signal processing. What she makes of it is what she thinks of it, and that determines whether it's rape or shared orgasm. Suffering is exactly like that. No one person is equipped to judge the life of any other person, which is probably why a fella called Joshua ben David said in a speech called the Sermon on the Mount, "Judge not thy fellow man." And it's probably why the Egyptian Book of the Dead says, "Lest thine own heart be weighed against the feather of truth and found wanting." But as old as I am, as silly as I am, as drunk as I am, and as pipe-struck as I am, I'm not silly enough to think that I am able to look at any other human and condemn them to death. Why is it so? Well, maybe it's because when I was a nurse, I've made such decisions. And I've found that as a human, no matter how hard I studied, no matter how hard I worked on it, I was deeply uncomfortable with shouldering such a responsibility. Alright? I don't think I murdered anybody, but there were people I failed to resuscitate, and there were people who, when I realised that they had caught the flu, I rang their relatives and had their relatives talk to the doctor, and the relatives convinced the doctor not to prescribe antibiotics. And when the geriatric went into their death rattles and the relatives couldn't handle it, they called me in, and I sat there and I held the geriatric's hand while they died. And I claim to have superior levels of knowledge to most of the people who blather on about such matters on YouTube. I'm a time expired registered nurse. I've seen 12 babies born in hospitals. My own 2 children were born on the living room couch. I've had 12 patients that I cared for and I nursed, and they died, and I laid them out and I took them down to the morgue. I've identified my best friend for the police as a runway crash, and I've attempted to resuscitate a hang glider pilot who I was not responsible for ensuring his safety as he was towed off the ground by an ultralight, because happily, thankfully, he was being towed by somebody else's pilot. I've had a lot to do with birth and a lot to do with death. A hell of a lot more than most anti-natalists or efilists, and I've got to say, suffering is nothing but signal processing. It's a matter of opinion. Ciao.